Hi, I'm Jędrzej. I'm a rock climbing blogger and coach. In 2019, I started Strength Climbing, a website where I published posts about popular hangboard training protocols and, in general, methods of rock climbing training. The blog became quite popular, and I soon got the opportunity to put my knowledge into practice by remotely coaching climbers from around the world. One of the best parts of running a climbing blog is that I get the opportunity to discuss climbing training with dozens of other climbers and specialists. Last year, I received an email from Paul Gennaro, a boulderer based in New York. Paul wanted to know if a 40-year-old veteran could still gain strength to leap from V10 to V11 outdoor bouldering. At that point, he was getting close to sending one of the few premier lines in the Gunks called Venus in Scorpio. In the fall of 2022, he eventually stuck the final dyno and ticked his first outdoor V11. To reach his goal, Paul designed a detailed hangboard training plan based on the readings from the finger strength analyzer I wrote for my website. I found the whole story very interesting, and we decided to have a call and talk about climbing training in general. In our recorded conversation, we discussed training over 40, how gym climbing and system board training translates to outdoor climbing, what to eat during your bouldering sessions, climbing in Central Park, and other exciting topics. If you'd like to learn more about Paul's training methods and how to leverage the finger strength analyzer to monitor your fingerboard strength training progress, go ahead and have a listen. I don't have a lot of experience coaching, let's say, older climbers, although I don't think 40 something is old, not in my book at least. I mean, I turned 40 myself this year, and actually I feel like it's stronger than 20 years ago. And now I'm armed with a lot of knowledge about how to keep yourself healthy, not to injure yourself, what exercises to do to maintain health and to be able to train hard. I didn't know that when I was 20, for example. What I had back then was the book by Eric Horst, and the information back then was quite limited. I think there were some exercises in general, but I think now we know way more about tendon health, about how our body works when we're climbing and what's important, what's not important. So, but I did have an experience preparing a training program for an Italian climber. I think he was 50 something now, and he'd just done his first 8A, right? And he was eyeing an 8A plus, I think. And so he asked me to prepare a program for him. And I think at that moment, he was really at the top of his game, at least in this cycle. He was really strong, and I think his contact strength was really high. So I gave him a program of BFR, blood flow restriction. I don't know if you've ever tried it. Have you?
Blood flow restriction. No, I can't say that I have.
You know what it is? It's when you train and you use occlusion cuffs. You may do it on your legs, you may do it on your arms. I mean, people do it for different muscles, right? But climbers would put them somewhere here in the armpit. And what this does is that essentially it paralyzes the slow twitch fibers, like the fibers that you would use for endurance climbing or when you just
Oh, yeah. Okay.
so when you're doing repeaters, for example, at a reasonable load like 60%, you normally first utilize these slow twitch fibers, and then once they get fatigued, you engage more and more fast twitch fibers. However, with occlusion cuffs, you can just paralyze these slow twitch fibers very quickly and just focus on the fast twitch fibers, and you can have strength gains with much smaller loads, for example, you know? So get a massive strength, finger strength increases, and you don't need to train at your limit. Like you don't have to attach 80 kilograms to your harness or something like that, you know? It's very practical,
Yeah.
and it also it's soft on your tissues, right? So it doesn't target your tendons, although for your tendons it could be beneficial because it improves blood flow in essence, because once you take off the cuffs, blood flows and you have a better blood supply. But it doesn't stress your tissues that much. And that's why I gave this exercise to this climber, because I thought maybe when you're 50, you want to go easy.
Yeah, you don't want to go so hard. Yeah.
Right. And actually, after this training cycle, I think I gave him some more exercise. I think one arm long duration hangs, just to improve his tendon health. Yeah. And naturally, these long duration hangs, they will reduce your contact strength. So after the cycle, I don't think he was thrilled with the results. I think his performance went down a little bit, and maybe that was not what he expected, and maybe that was not something that I expected. But as I said, I think at the time we started, he was at the top of his game, and it's when you're peaking, it's difficult to continue. It's not linear. Progress is not linear. Sometimes you need to take a step back.
I was going to talk about that.
Yeah. And I think that's what happened, because now I checked back with him, asked for an update, and he told me it's fine again, and he's benefiting from the base that we'd built with this program. And so yeah, that's my experience. He told me now he's close to sending a really, really difficult 8A plus. So it wasn't time wasted in a way, right? You just cannot hammer strength all the time. Sometimes you have to focus on something else, or that's what I'd say. And you? So what's your experience?
You what? With peaking, I mentioned to you that I've never committed to a hangboard routine really before, except for one time when I had to.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I was forced to, because I was sport climbing for several years at a time, and there was a mono clip and a 513, and I needed to make that mono clip, and there was no other way. And that there was a Beastmaker at the gym, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll hang on this thing. The long story short, I realized just because I could hang, I needed to start doing pull-ups, because that didn't necessarily mean just because I could hang, I was going to be able to let go, hang on one finger, and make that clip. That's what I was worried about. So I was like, well, that's cool that I can hang for 10 seconds on the monos on the Beastmaker. I think it's the 2000 or 3000, whatever.
Definitely. Beastmaker 2000 does have monos. Yeah. Sloped.
So
regular.
So what I started doing was pull-ups, and I was like, it went very slow. First it went from 2, then it went to 4, and then several weeks later, I was up to 10, and then I PR'd at somewhere around 12 or 13 mono pull-ups. And I was like, okay, let's give this a shot. And I guessed correctly. So when I finally sent that 513, it went first go, and I had just enough to even fiddle with the clip if need be. I had more energy than I necessarily needed to make that clip, and then I sent my first 513A that way. And I didn't go back to the hangboard because there wasn't any climbs that really required mono strength at the gym. It's just like it was like very random, and I think route setters very much don't think about setting clips placing holds right next to quick draws that would force a climber to dangle from one finger and make a clip. So it was just like one of those things I wanted, you know?
It's not good for business, I'd say.
It's not, yeah, it's for sure not good for business, you know? And I didn't want to skip the quick draw. I actually wanted to make the quick draw. So
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
you know, other climbers were skipping. I was like, no, I want the full experience.
Uh-huh.
So that was my only experience. And then climbing Venus forced me to revisit the hangboard
Yeah.
and really think about what was going on. And I've read all the stuff. I listened to podcasts about the Anderson brothers and this, that, and the other. But you know what? I didn't know really where to go. So I figured out the 513 mono clip that I needed to make. I can figure this out as well. So I decided to use my own intuition and really examine the access point to the climb, which was this sloperous pinch that had like that required me to fully lock off my thumb in a crimp position, which was like, wow, that's unique. So, you know, I just started hangboarding on a 10 mil edge because I researched that, and the opening of the climb is very similar to a 10 mil edge. And I was like, you know what? I'm lacking a little bit of power. I feel like I'm at my upper strength here, my upper limit in finger strength. So why don't I make the first move of the climb feel easier for me? So when I get to the point where I'm struggling with, I won't already be at my upper threshold.
Sure.
So I just started with basic hangboarding, and I decided on 10 mil because I've also read that was a good testing edge by some pro climbers. And then also the climb had a 10 mil, probably even smaller, 8 mil crimp at the very bottom, the rail. And I went with that. So as I wrote about in the blog post for you, I still didn't address my weakness because I was trying initially first to address the thumb with slings. And I think some pro climber named Aiden, I can't think of Aiden's last name. He just climbed Alpha.
British, climber.
Yeah, he talks about, I think, sling training. And I tried that, but it didn't work for me. Just to isolate the thumb. What I realized was I for some reason I wasn't able to increase the load. I was stuck at 40 pounds, and I thought I needed more than 40 pounds just to be able to isolate the thumb. So what I did was I turned back to the Beastmaker, and then my gym got attention, hangboard with a 10 mil edge on it. And I was like, this is perfect. And I started hanging at half crimp, and then open hand, because open hand, for some reason, I'm stronger open hand than in half crimp. And then I crept my way up to like 70, 80 pounds. But then I was stuck in progress. I was like, I wasn't making any more progress. It was just done. And I was like, well, I still haven't addressed my thumb. I was like, why am I doing this open hand? This is crazy.
So
when I need to be able to lock off my thumb.
Just to get the numbers, what is your weight? How many pounds do you weigh?
I'm 150, between 150 and 152, but right now my fight weight is 150.
150.
I feel really solid at 150.
And you add 70 pounds, yeah? And you hang on a 10 millimeter edge.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's just to get the perspective. I mean, that's a lot. that's really.
Yeah. Well, I use your tool in tandem to guide me where I needed to go. Yeah, and I was referencing Paul Robinson's best. I think his best is 90 pounds at like 130, 132 for 5 seconds. So I eventually got the 90 pounds, but I didn't have his strength to weight ratio. So it was like, whatever, it doesn't matter. I weigh 20 plus pounds on him. And I started locking the thumbs off on full crimping and locking the thumbs off on the board. So the moment that happened, I felt like, wow, my numbers just exploded up. I went from like easily, I could say I went from like 80, 85, 90 to I went up to 110 for 5 seconds. That was my max. And I was like, when I climbed in the gym, especially in crimp problems, I felt superhuman. I for my body weight and my size, I was 1 second away from hitting V14 according to the tool. And I can tell you one thing, that was the strongest my fingers have ever been. And I was able to hold that for about 2 weeks, and I was in awe. I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. But that was only temporary. So when I fell hard. Like it was like going to the hangboard one day and saying, well, I can hang 110, no problem. And then you're struggling just holding 80.
Yeah.
So when I peaked, and when I fell hard, and it was hard to really comprehend all that because it just started to get cold for the climb. And I was like, oh man, I peaked way too early. Oh my God, what am I going to do? My numbers aren't creeping back up. And my friend was like, oh, calm down, calm down, calm down. You're within a certain range. And I'm like, yeah, I'm within a certain range, but like I'm not at my strongest because I trained the whole entire summer to be at my strongest. And I peaked. Not only that, I got sick like 2 weeks later. And then my numbers imploded even further. So I fell all the way to like 55 pounds.
Wow.
On a 10 mil edge. It was extreme. It was extreme. Imagine going from 110 for 5 seconds to struggling on 55 pounds.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So I don't know if I contracted COVID because I tested negative for COVID. I tested negative for the flu. The guy was like, you just got a bad cold, man. Just go and rest and shake it off. So the 10 mil edge started to become just like so stressful because like my fingers, like there's a level of pain that goes with attaching 100 pounds to your harness.
Yeah, especially
and
on
hanging
small
on
edge.
on a span, especially at full crimp.
Yeah, for sure.
And I wasn't ready to put myself through all that again. So I opted for a half inch, which translates to 12.7 millimeters.
Yeah, something like that.
So I started hanging on 12.7, and my joints and everything just felt so much better. And I started creeping back up.
Yeah.
And when I set the climb, my finger strength was at V12. So it was a roller coaster of emotions because I was expecting to send a climb at the end of September, and I didn't even get it until November. And finger strength was such a huge part of my success because the holds on that climb are just so bizarre and so unique. If my finger strength, if I wasn't on top of my game, I don't think it would have been possible, even if the conditions were right or not. You know, I remember on that day the dew point was 31 degrees. It was cold. It was only 50 degrees, but the humidity was high at 80. But I had a 31 dew point, and I was like, yeah, okay, maybe not, and I'll go for it. And my fingers at based on the tool that used at V12, it was like, it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard. I could have given it multiple burns that day. I just felt so solid. And if you look at the way I flow through the climb, I knew I had trained correctly. And my assessment for what I had needed was correct at that time. Because I felt like if I would have showed up with a V11 strength, I would have been like at my limit. I would have been like, I don't know, maybe. Because this is the hardest benchmark in the Gunks. So it's easy to think the crux is V10. Then you start compiling some of these smaller moves that fill V9. Maybe there's 2 V10 moves in this, but it's really V11. Like, there's a little bit of controversy with this climb. You know, I've spoken to some people that haven't done it, and they say, "Nah, this is like a really hard 12." And then some people like, "Nah, I cruise it." And like, you know, that starts to get in your head as well too. But what you really have to really think about is the process and what's needed for you to flow through the climb and not really struggle, because I wanted to on that send, I wanted to be an autopilot. I didn't want to be thinking anything in my mind. I didn't want to think about the send. I just wanted to let cruise control take over my body, have an outer body experience. And I wanted to look like I was in a state of flow, like totally. And I think when you look at that, it looks like I was in a flow state. And I woke up right before the dyno. I was like, this is it, man. We're giving it all you got. So I woke up for that dyno, but up until that moment for the dyno, I was in a complete flow state. So, and I love being in a flow state because I feel like I can have an outer body experience almost in a way. Like my body's like on autopilot, and I don't really have to worry about anything except just breathing. And so I don't want to be like struggling and fighting the climb and like shaking all over the place. And I felt like that tool, like specifically that tool, really helped me because that helped me adjust the loads. And if you really think about it, I mean, it was really spot on. I mean, the Gunks is known to be a sandbag place to begin with. The Northeast doesn't really have a ton of hard climbing compared to the West Coast, you know? So that was my experience with peaking. I'm glad I was able to like turn it all around, and but it was a bit frightening when you peak too soon.
Yeah, but why do you think these things happen? Because I've had similar experiences. Like even now, I had every once in a while I have this experiment with keto diet. Okay, and just to see how it impacts my climbing. And I mean, I don't know, there's a lot of discussion about it, but I know for sure that it depletes your glycogen stores and you get weaker and weaker on it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to climb much worse, because I actually felt fine climbing, but when I measured on the Hangboard 2 weeks into the keto diet, my results were pretty good. I mean, I weigh 66 kilograms, and I think I did plus 56 kilograms on 20 millimeter edge. So that was like 180% of my body weight on a 20 millimeter. And 2 weeks later, just 1 month into keto diet, it was already plus 40 something, so 10 kilograms even, something like that, or maybe 7 kilograms. So that's one thing for me that I know that surely decreases my strength. If I eat low carb, then I notice after a while that my strength decreases. But sometimes it's even not that. Sometimes, like I once did a cycle, a recruitment cycle, and it went great. I did Bechtel's ladders. I don't know if you know this exercise. I mean, it's just a variation of max hangs. It's that you hang for a bit longer, 12 seconds, I think. And it has more volume. It's something between recruitment and hypertrophy, I'd say. And went really great. And then I thought, okay, wow, we did this recruitment cycle. Now let's do a hypertrophy cycle, and with regular repeaters, like 70% maximum strength. And my strength just started falling down. And after like 12 weeks of this repeater training, my strength was way below the level that I had before I started. And then it took me a while to get back, But I don't know why these things happen, but they do. It's just impossible to maintain a peak for a long time. Sometimes it's frustrating.
I think the reason why is because like I think the fast twitch muscle fibers, you can tell me if I'm wrong, they prefer glucose. So like, I think that when you're training to hangboard, you have to view yourself more as a power lifter if your goal is max weighted hangs.
Mhm.
And I feel like the preferred fuel source is glucose. So what I do, I'm I've tried the keto diet, but not necessarily with climbing. I have like my own sort of crazy diet, I guess you could say. But if you see me at the gym, I will always have a jar of something yellow with
Mhm.
me. And people will always ask me, what the hell is in that jar?
Mhm.
So it's just raw honey. So I put 3 scoops
Honey.
of raw
Ah,
honey,
okay.
sometimes
Mhm.
creatine,
Yeah.
and that fuels me because sometimes I feel like my body needs something quick
Mhm.
to utilize and use, and a banana doesn't do it. Dates take too long to digest, and it used to be Gatorade for me when I was sport climbing, and I wouldn't gain any weight from it. I could drink like a liter of Gatorade while sport climbing, and just like my body would burn it all off. But I didn't like all the additives in Gatorade and these
Yeah.
sports drinks. So
Yeah.
I eventually turned to raw honey as an alternative. And my body just uses raw honey so much better than any other thing that I've ever tried. It's unbelievable.
Mhm. Do you
Uh
dilute it?
and
Do you dilute it with water, or do you just take scoops?
I just dilute it in water. I just a normal I could even show you. I could even show you the jar, but it's not. Hold on. Let me show you the jar.
Yeah, sure.
I'll have to. I'll have to.
Yeah.
Just a jar like this size,
That's a
and
big jar.
I put about 3 heaping teaspoons in it,
Uh-huh.
and that will be my fuel source for my climbing session. And then I'll
Yeah.
mix that with water.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll throw creatine in there,
Yeah.
and raw honey is also slowly absorbed, and it's also like a percentage of it is rapidly absorbed.
Uh-huh.
So I was, you have to read up on this. I'm just trying to recall, but I think like something like 60% of it is very slowly processed in the body, and then 40% of it is like readily available. And I use that for my climbing sessions, and
Mhm.
that sustains me through my whole session. So when I'm at the hangboard, I feel like I need sugar.
Mhm.
I turn to that
And is it like
because
you feel like you're getting weaker, your energy is being depleted, and like you can attach less weight, and then you eat some honey, and again you can hang more load, or what? Do you notice anything like that?
for me, if I really go hard on a boulder
Yeah.
problem, or if I go hard on a hangboard, I feel depleted after, because when I go hard on something, I'm giving it like my all, and I use that to like replenish what I basically spent
Hmm.
in energy.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm gonna say that, like, Pavel, right? The creator of the kettlebell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pavel, he says something, and I like what he says. Something it takes like 5 minutes for the body to reproduce more ATP, and for you to give at least another attempt at maximum effort.
Hmm.
So, and then he says something that it takes about 5 minutes for your body to replenish its creatine phosphate
Yeah.
stores, or
Yeah.
something to that degree. So I kind of view myself as a power lifter in a way, and I
Hmm.
want to make sure that I'm resting enough in between each attempt at the hangboard or climbing to where I'm able to give it 110%. Not a half baked attempt,
Yeah.
not a well rested go. I want to give everything a well rested go.
It's
So
interesting you
that's
mentioned creatine, that you add creatine to honey. Do you use creatine on a regular basis? Do you maintain
yeah.
Yeah.
I use it on a regular basis. I
Mm-hmm.
use creatine
Mm-hmm.
on a regular basis. Uh, that's really something I include in my morning shake all the time.
Yeah, I do it as well. I find it very, very helpful. And actually, when you said about hanging with like powerlifting or hanging with very high loads, the thing that goes first is ATP, and ATP is resynthesized from the phosphocreatine, right? So, but then you need sugar later on, like to replenish your glycogen, etc. So of course sugar is important, but creatine, having enough creatine in your muscles definitely helps, right? And I also I saw an article somewhere that for older sportsmen, creatine is very, very helpful. Also, that if you are over 40, you should definitely include it. And there is some controversy. I mean, all articles that I've read indicate that creatine is safe and beneficial in many ways, also for mental health, I think. But one drawback is that it makes you heavier, right? Because you retain more water in your muscles. So that's why some people are not very keen or on experimenting with creatine. Not to mention that it may give you diarrhea. I don't know if you're unused to it, maybe, or some people just don't tolerate.
Yeah.
But definitely you will retain more water in your muscles, so you're going to be heavier. But I think the net there's a net gain in that it's still okay.
For sure for bouldering, I mean, we're training for what, 10, sometimes 15, max 20 moves, preferably, hopefully less. So I think if you are gaining water weight, it's and I don't think it's anything necessarily to worry about, you know. If your diet is in check and you've made, like, you're not dieting, you've made real lifestyle changes that you live by,
something sustainable,
that is sustainable, then I don't think you really have to worry too much. That's my experience. You know, I find when I'm dieting for climbing, it's not sustainable. So I've opted like many years ago to make lifestyle changes across the board, so I don't fluctuate up and down. I hate all that. So I try to maintain like my fight weight year in and year out. So I'm never like, oh, I got to get back in shape. Because like the older you get, the harder it gets. And as you age, you're shooting at a moving target. And the things that you did to get leaner in your 30s will have to be more extreme in your 40s.
Sure. Definitely.
Yeah. There was really only one bouldering gym at the time, I believe in New York City, called MPHC. And the climbers there would go out to Central Park, and this was in my first year of climbing, and they would take us to a place called Rat Rock. And it's called literally Rat Rock because rats scurry across the rock.
Yeah.
I've even seen rats run across people's crash pads. So yeah, while you're bouldering, there's a rat running across your crash pad. So there was a stronger. Oh yeah, it's crazy. There was. I
don't know if this is something I should say, but I sometimes had rats in my garage when I trained. So I mean, it's just a climbing thing, I think.
Yeah, rats and climbing. It's just a climbing thing. So there's this older Japanese gentleman there, and his name was Yuki, and he was 60 at the time. And I mean, if you saw the New York Times article, he's like dressed like sort of in a way like Bruce Lee in a way, and he's got like, you know, like the tank top on and everything. And he's like muscly, and he's like the strongest person there. And I'm like 27 at the time. I'm like, this guy is so strong. I'm like, what's going on here? And he'd fly up everything, and then, you know, I'd pick his brain. And
how tall is this red rock?
It's not very tall. It's
Uh,
just not. It's just a traverse.
uh-huh.
The
It's a
boulder
traverse.
is so well. Let me back it up. One area is kind of tall. It's around the corner from the key area of Rat Rock where the Polish Traverse is. But the main area where everybody tries to, cut their teeth is on the Polish Traverse. It's called the Polish Traverse. I don't know why. I think the first gentleman to send it was Polish,
It's a
and
nice
it's a
accent.
famous, yeah, it's a famous sandbagged V5 of Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
It's everyone's like in New York City. It's everybody's first V5,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
Yuki
and
can
it's
run
sandbagged. And it's sandbagged. So that's
in a sandbag. Just to let you know, I reclimbed it after I did Venus to Scorpio. So after I sent the V11, I went back there and I could tell you it's me peaking. I'm like, oh my god, this is so sandbagged.
but maybe it's
So
about power endurance, Maybe that's the thing.
it's a power endurance. Yes, it is. It's semi power endurance. Crimps, awful slopers. It's upper body driven. I don't even know how this ended up being the V5. It's just whatever. It was established. It was established in the 19, I think, in the 1980s, and back then the
Uh-huh.
highest grade was like V12. And it's just god awful. So the poor people of New York City try to climb this thing, and they're climbing this thing for years and years and years and years and years, and it maybe once they start climbing V8 or V9 in the gym, they'll go out there and send it.
Mm.
But at least that was the case for me. I had to climb like V8, V9 in the gym before I even sent the Polish Traverse. It's just that hard. But Yuki would teach people literally the movements and the technique needed to climb that climb. And he was like the groundskeeper in a way of
Mm.
this whole place. I think he even like swept up around the place. He would drop. I've seen him drop cedar. You know what I'm talking about, like wood chips
Mm-hmm.
by the rock, so you
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be like walking on dirt.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he would only climb there, no other place. And I don't know why that was. He would never go to gym. I think he went to the Gunks maybe once. He wouldn't go to any other area of Central Park, I believe. This was his spot, and he religiously went here like all the time. If I recall correctly, every time I went there in my 20s, he was always there, and that's and that New York Times article was written
Mm-hmm.
because that photographer, I guess, was taking pictures of Yuki, and then Yuki was having like a one-on-one session with me and trying to like walk me through this thing that I was just so struggling on for years upon years at a time, I guess, or months. I don't know. It felt like years. I didn't even send this thing in until like several years later after Yuki had sprayed all the beta and told me exactly what to do. So
So it's very technical, it seems.
it was technical as well. It was technical as well too. It's one of the most technical V5s that one could ever climb,
Mm-hmm.
and it's humbling because you're in your 20s and you see the 6-year-old guy running laps on this thing back and forth, forwards and backwards. He could do it on command at will. He would climb this multiple times in a day in a session, and you're struggling just to get halfway through it. And you're like, what the hell? What is this guy on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the most bizarre things you would ever see. Of course, there's like this, like, and he moves really smooth too, like almost like like it was a martial art. That dude
Mm-hmm.
climbed like it was martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what's going on here? You would only see this in Central Park, where the strongest guy at the rock is a 60-year-old Japanese guy. Apparently, I think he had a friend from the 1980s
Mm-hmm.
that sent a V10 that's directly under it called Como's Roof. And it's very seldom repeated. And this guy really, it's probably Daniel Woods got under there one time. I heard if you Google Daniel Woods in Central Park, you'll see him. And I think he gave his opinion on that V10. And he's like, he touched it. He said something like possibly V12. I don't know. Daniel didn't give it a really good solid go or anything. But it's ultra sandbag. But the point being was this no-name climber from the 1980s couldn't literally say, hey, we got a V12 in the 1980s in Central Park. And it would have been like a Cura scandal. So
Yeah.
some of the people that have climbed this V10 said it's one of the hardest V10s they've ever experienced for a single move in their entire life. And I believe that's true. I love for like some pro climbers to come out here and really like throw down on that V10 because that initial move is just ridiculous. But you know, Yuki and his friend, I guess, helped really maybe establish a sort of culture, a scene where everybody from New York City went eventually into Central Park and just would like, you know, use these as local test pieces and then go from there to the Gunks. And the fact that Yuki was able to like, in a way, be a sensei and spray beta, and whoever asked him for help, he would advise because he was such a nice man, if I recall correctly. He would help anybody who asked. And then during that whole scene, Ashima was there as well too. So that was really interesting as well too, because then it was a unique sort of situation because you had Yuki, then you had Ashima. She was just a little kid running around. And she would ask climbers, "Hey, what you doing?" And you were like, "Move away, kid. I don't want to be seen talking to you." Because she was like really small. It was like somebody's child. So I remember, you know, New York City was just it was just like super unique place, and the crag was so colorful, and that's really the only way I can really describe it. There wasn't really any defining like strongman except for this one gentleman, and that's why the New York Times wrote this article. You know, this Zen master. I mean, as cliche as that sounds, like Zen Japanese, but you know, it's like this dude really lived it up, man. He had the tank top on. He moved so fluidly. I don't understand why this guy isn't more popular than what he is outside of New York City, because he was a special character, you know.
There are a lot of unsung heroes, you know, everywhere. You know, you see a person in the street, and most probably they are really good at something. You never know.
Yeah. So I hated outdoor climbing after that, so much so I became a gym rat because you know, and I was satisfied until I wasn't. And COVID really changed all that, and it forced me to go back to those outdoor roots. And you know, with competition climbs popping up everywhere, that really upset me because like the gym scene has changed. It's no longer what it used to be, and I just had to adapt to it. And I found more comfort in climbing outside than in the gym. But then I also realized that I had to adapt and change and just modernize, because if not, then the gym isn't going to make a whole lot of sense to me. So as long as I can get my fill of what I think are gym climbs that could translate the outdoors, I'm happy. And then I'll try the competition stuff. Another thing I also felt that happened in the Northeast is because we don't have a ton of hard boulder problems in the 13, 14. We don't even have a 15. A lot of the climbs are ultra sandbagged. Like in the gym, I think some of the route setters believe if it's a V10, every move has to feel like V10. So I started suspecting that these V10s were a lot harder than what they initially were. I started seeing a V10 move stacked on top of a V10 move, and then they were being called V10. So I was like, I think that was another thing that gave me confidence in trying Venus. Was I felt like I had experienced multiple moves in a V9 that were V10 and V10 that are V10 that would give me the confidence to even try a V11. So I think because like if your gym doesn't have any institutional knowledge, right? There's no V14 route setter, right? Then if you just have a bunch of kids setting with no institutional knowledge, you're going to get a new flavor of V7 every time there's a new hire. And it's going to be their perception of what V7 is.
Sure.
It doesn't matter how much experience you have, you're not going to be able to tell that young gun 20-year-old route setter, hey man, it's a bit stiff here. He's not going to listen to you. He's not going to take your advice. So my gym per se used to have, and I call this very important, institutional knowledge. If your gym has institutional knowledge and you have people that have climbed V14 or above, you're lucky because you're able to learn from them, grow from them, and experience to a small degree what they have experienced. I've made my best personal gains based on individuals and route setters coming from Hueco tanks or bouldering, V14 in Red Rocks. I've made the best growth there. And where I've regressed is when those individuals leave. So it doesn't matter the gym size. It really matters on the quality of the route setters. And if your route setters are just comp setters, it doesn't matter. There's no institutional knowledge. These are the individuals that really hold the keys to whether you're going to excel or implode. Because I feel without institutional knowledge, it's like wandering in the desert 40 days and 40 nights. Am I getting stronger? Am I getting weaker? And that's why people turn to your site, because they need a barometer. They need a benchmark. They need to understand, am I feeling weak today? Or is it my perception that I'm feeling weak because my performance on plastic is not reflecting my perceived reality of myself? So if I'm hangboarding and I'm getting fantastic, ridiculous numbers, and I can do my one-arm pull-ups, then obviously the situation really, to a degree, is probably not me. So I think like when you have individuals that have the expertise and the background and the knowledge, and then you combine that with tools that you can cross-reference, then you're confident in your own ability. But if you just have young gun kids and you're paying them like, minimum wage, they have no outdoor experience, they're just strong. And we all know these route setters that are just strong. It can ruin you as a climber, and you're not even understanding, or you're not even understanding what's going on. You're just saying, I'm weak today, I can't figure out why. And we prescribe to this belief that I'm getting older, when the truth is we're not really getting older. You know what I'm saying? So I feel that has forced me to go outside as well too. I know it's a lot of what I just said, but in a way, I started outdoors. I ended up.
No, that's. I mean,
yeah.
This was super interesting about how indoor climbing can be perceived, and yeah, it's a rarity to have really experienced outdoor climbers setting indoor problems. What do you think of, do you ever do system boarding like moon boarding or kilter board? What do you think about it? How does that translate to outdoor climbing? Let's say, because in my opinion, in many ways, it's more similar. System board climbing could even be more similar to outdoor climbing than a lot of these new competition style boulder problems, in commercial gyms that are a lot about jumping and being upside down and stuff like that.
I feel the initial moon board that came out, I think it was in 2016, the initial one that they sold on the market was the closest. And I really liked
the yellow school halls, the set, schoolroom.
The
set.
first, the schoolroom, the first one, and then it started to get more jumpy, and then I went to the tension board because I feel like on the tension board with the crimps, you can't get as jumpy if you're setting crimp climbs. You can, but not to the degree as the moon board. You have to be, obviously have more precision. So I felt that the tension board for me translated well to outdoors. I actually trained a little bit on the tension board for this climb in the summer. And I used that to a degree. And I felt that that really had helped me. But I feel like the latest boards that are coming out are focusing, I don't know much about the kilter, but I see like on the newer sets for the moon board, there's a lot of jumping. I don't want to name any names, any of the pro climbers, but that's not really reflective of what's going. That doesn't reflect reality. Like especially at least in my perception, for me, in my anecdotal viewpoint, because in the Gunks it's precision. Yeah, there's a dyno at the end. Yeah, there's a jump, but it's more about technique, precision, strength, and power. It's less about swinging from one hole to the next, doing some awkward movement, flipping upside down, that sort of thing. I mean, you're starting to see the flip upside down on the moon board. I don't think the moon board was meant for that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just creativity. It's, anybody. You can't say it's illegal. Some people say you cannot match on the moon board, and
and now you can match. Now you can heel hook. So I mean I mean, who cares about the rules? But what I'm concerned about more is that the gym's sole purpose from the very beginning was to help you in the off season to get ready for outdoors. And I'm from that old school thought. But the problem is the gym has now become its own thing, separate from outdoor climbing. So the people caught in the middle have to adapt to survive, but then also decipher, are they headed in the right direction, the wrong direction, or stuck somewhere in the middle, because you can climb all the indoor V10s you want. They're going to be here today, gone tomorrow, but the lasting memories are going to be the ones that you get from outside.
Although you can get a kick out of projecting system board projects. I mean, there are.
I have. That is true. That is true.
Yeah. There are problems that I've been trying for 2 years or something like that, and I'm getting closer, and maybe one day I will send. So, and they are there. They will not disappear.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. You're totally right. But I mean, some of the greatest experiences and the most euphoric feelings I've ever had in my life that I mentioned to you in writing was like when I sent Venus, when I sent Yikes. Like I have to do so much self-censoring now when I send these climbs because I'm like cursing up a storm. It's like I can't believe it. It's like when I sent my first V9 in the Gunks, I was high all day for the rest of the day, all night. I couldn't stop smiling, and I could see how you could get addicted to chasing that. Like some of these climbers, I was like, I wonder if these climbers are addicted to chasing that send high that they get afterwards. I was like, I could see that. Like if that feeling that you get sending on rock is so different than the feeling that you get sending on plastic. You would have to you know, when they say Daniel Woods like hangs out sleeping by Return of the Sleepwalker,
Yeah.
like plastic ain't gonna do that for you. I bet you the feeling he felt after he sent Sleepwalker, man, I can relate to that to a degree because I've experienced it at the 8A level. So what he probably felt after he sent Sleepwalker, oh my God, he's gonna take that to the grave. So I mean, like some of the accomplishments that you get climbing on rock afterwards, it's just like you have to experience it to know what people are talking about.
But
You know,
where do you think that comes from? Because I'm sure it's not about the grade, because he sent V17, you sent
no,
so it's about climbing your own Everest, right?
it's the process,
It's the process, how much effort it takes, how much you invest in it. Failing.
The more you fail, the bigger the reward.
Yeah.
And the failing and the self-doubt and the belief that you're in over your head, or is this even possible? You know, the ups and downs, the journey, it's crazy. Crazy. And then and then all the satisfactory afterwards. It's just it's amazing. If you look at it, they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. The suffering compared to the joy you experience, all off the same problem. One thing can give you so much joy and so much pain, all at the same time.
You know, in Poland, we have. I live in Krakow, and we have rocks around Krakow. Climbing here became, I think, started in the 19th century probably, but it became more and more popular in the 50s. And there were these waves of climbers, and each wave had a name. And there were in the 50s, I think that it was in the 50s. These people were called, I don't know if I get the English name right, they were called the repentants, people who repent, for some sins or something. They used to call them that because they looked at them and they were like, they're crazy. They must be repenting for something doing this shit, That's why they called them that. But they did.
It's amazing, the human condition. Why do we chase these things? Why do we do these things? They mean nothing.
It's what we are, I think when people get comfortable, when people start getting bored, they start looking for trouble. It's just the way we are, We just hate peace in a way. So I'd also like to ask you, because you started climbing at the age of 27, is that correct? Somewhere around there?
Yeah.
Did anything change, like in terms of recovery, in terms of, I mean, you seem to be getting stronger and stronger, right? Despite getting older, right?
Yes, yeah, I can.
What has changed? What can you say? How can you compare climbing at 27 and climbing at 40, 43, I think, yes?
I can speak to that because I had to reevaluate that for climbing my first 8A. Well, and then I'll tie that into the hangboard because this was an important thing that I had to consider. In your 20s, you could climb every other day, or you could perhaps even climb every day. And then, in your 30s, you're starting to think about 2 days rest. And in your 40s, 3 days rest, sometimes 4. You find yourself only climbing twice a week. And the reason why I find myself climbing only twice a week now in my 40s is because I want to improve. And I think when you start to get to the tail end of your 30s and you only take 1 rest day or 2 rest days, you're going to get injured at some point because your recovery is just so much slower. And I knew this even in my 20s, because if I took 2 rest days in my 20s, I felt amazing and I was ready to go as hard, even though I could climb every day. But I didn't really, in your 20s, you don't listen to your body. So you're like, oh, I just want to keep climbing. I just want to keep climbing. I just want to keep climbing. But like in your 40s, you have to listen to your body or it could take you out the game. And you have to view your body's energy as currency. It's money.
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to spend your money? How do you want to spend your energy? It's currency. You only have this much of it. So when you go to the gym, how are you going to use it? So you start to think in terms of years, and then you start to think, well, if I'm going twice a week to the gym and I can only really throw down twice a week really, really hard, that's what like Sean Rabitou probably like that's a month of climbing for him because he's climbing every day. So you're like, wow, I can do what somebody in their 20s can do uh for only like a short amount of time in comparative to them throwing down each and every day. So that means I can't project on my climb as much as I want to.
Mm-hmm.
That means the weather becomes an issue because I don't have that many opportunities. Am I rested when I try this climb? Is it in alignment with the weather? All these things start to come into play because you don't have that much time. You're spending a lot of your time in recovery,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you're really giving it 100%, as I said earlier with the hangboard, you really can't go hard and do a max hang every time you go to the gym. Your body is just not going to be recovered for it. Would a power lifter go and do a max deadlift every time he goes to the gym? No, I think they only max like once a month.
Well,
So you have to start.
there was this Bulgarian coach, and he made his power lifters lift 100% every day, multiple repetitions
Every day.
every day, and they were the best in the world. It's just if you wanted to be the best in the world, Olympic gold, you'd listen to his advice, but it was make or break. The best ones won Olympic gold. Anyone short of the best would end up injured and out of the competition. But they would still do it.
But were they in their 40s?
No, definitely not. But this is something else. I'd like, even when you're 20, when you're pushing it, and I know this for a fact because I have had experience with such climbers. Even if you're 20 and you're pushing it, you're going to end up injured. So in many ways, what you just said about recovery and making it efficient in a way and having a clear goal and investing currency like your energy like currency, this is also valid for 20-year-old climbers, for 30-year-old climbers. I firmly believe it, but of course much more so for 40-year-old climbers. I will send you a link to this video about this Bulgarian coach because it's extremely fascinating. He was a legend, so I think you'll like it.
Yeah, because you only have so much energy that you can expend.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean you're only training twice a week. That means you have to work the opposing muscle groups.
Yeah.
Because if you get stronger physically, as you said, you're getting stronger with age, you have to start getting more conscious of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And strength is like a fickle superpower. You could lose it at any moment. Because if I'm not strong and pushing, I could potentially break because the stronger I can pull,
yeah,
my shoulders, my deltoids need to be like superhuman. They need to be strong as well too, because a shoulder injury can knock me out.
Yeah,
it has to support that. You have to start working out your legs a little bit as well too, because guess what? When you need to carry 50 pounds on your back to go to the crag, you might be strong enough to do the climb, but if you're not conditioned well enough to walk 2 miles with 50 pounds on your back, you're going to be gassed by the time you get to the boulder problem. So you have to start thinking about all these things. You have to think about, you have to be honest with yourself. Am I 100% recovered? Can I can I really give a maximum effort to the hangboard? So yesterday I was supposed to climb, but I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm still sore from Saturday's session. I
Right.
have to take so in your 40s, you want to climb all the time, but the truth is you really can't, because you really have to listen to your body. And you could say, I climb Tuesday, I climb Saturday, I rest in between. Well, that's kind of weather dependent, because if you still feel sore Monday night and Tuesday morning, then hey, you can't go to the gym Tuesday to train. You need to push it to Wednesday. So you have to really learn to adapt, and you have to learn to appreciate your body and love your body, because if you want to get the most out of it, you gotta let it be recovered.
As I said, I
And
think that could be a good thing, because young climbers, sometimes what they do is they just climb. They don't train to get better. They just climb randomly. And, it's fun, but some of them just want to climb. That's fine. But some of them want to get better at it. And they're not, because they are tired all the time, and they are spending their whole day at the gym, and then the next day, and they're just not improving. So when you go to the gym, how long is your typical training session, and how do you structure it? Do you have like a structured way of climbing at the gym, like when you do a
I have a very structured way.
Okay.
The senior citizen in me, even though I don't know if I look like one, but for climbing this, I'm gonna call myself a senior, because I can enter into the masters at any time in any of these competitions. What I do first is I don't trust the route setters for the life of me. So their perception of what climbing grades are, I throw that out the window. So the first thing that I do is I warm up on 10 to 12 V0s to anywhere to V2. And I just the goal is just to get the blood flowing. I don't even want to feel the climb. If I felt the climb, then I did it wrong. And this should feel super light and super easy. Then what I'll do is I will either do my own version of one arm pull-ups. And how I'll warm up for one arm pull-up is with those bands. I don't know the name of them. The
resistance bands.
So I grab the assistance bands. So I grab the assistance bands, I sling it over a bar, I double it, and then I do one arm pull up on the left, one arm pull up with the right. I give it 3 minutes rest. Then I go from doubling the band to singling the band, and then I'll do that same. I'll rest. Then I'll go from I'm on 2 strands. I'll go to 1 strand of the band, and I'll pull on that. And then, depending on what I'm doing, let's say I'm training my one arm lock off stuff, which is not even really a one arm lock off. I will discard the band, and I'll see how many one arm pull ups I can do after that, but with a slight kipping to where it's more momentum based, and it's in line with and I'm trying to yank as hard as I can instead of doing it static, because I want to mimic campusing, because I can't campus and do one arm pull-ups. I can do one or the other. So I found by trying to make my one arm pull-ups dynamic, it can mimic campusing to a degree in terms of the amount of force I'm applying to yank. So I'm trying to yank as hard as I can, and I can do probably at best I've done 5 on average. If I'm conditioned properly, all the time I'm doing 3 on my left arm, 3 on my right arm. Sometimes I might take that same methodology and then grab a 10-pound weight and do that as well too. From there, I will then go to the hangboard, and I'll warm up on the hangboard.
Yeah.
And what I do for the hangboard, let's say I'm doing max hangs. I'll go to I'll go to the campus rung. I'll hang from the campus rung for a couple of seconds, 10 at most, super light. Then I'll rest a little bit, and then I'll go straight to the Beastmaker, because I like the Beastmaker for warming up before I transition to a micro edge. So I'll start hanging from the Beastmaker 2000 on the larger holds, and then on the smaller, which I think is 18 or 19.
Yeah, 15.
And then I think, and then it goes to 15, right? Something like that. And then I will just hang on that for a couple of minutes. I'm sorry, a couple of seconds, and then I'll rest a couple of minutes, and then I will then go
at body weight.
Let's
right?
say
you do that with no
at body, at just that body weight, just that body weight, no weight added. I'm not adding weight at this point. Then I'll go to the 12.7 millimeter edge or the 10 millimeter edge. I'll hang open-handed at body weight. And then at that point, I'll say to myself, okay, my fingers are feeling warm.
So that's recruitment, basically. That's finger recruitment.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about how you structure your sessions, and that first you work on your, let's say, okay, as far as I recall, first you climb a few easy problems, then you work on your upper body strength, let's say recruitment of upper body, and then you proceed to hanging on the hangboard and progressively smaller edges, yes, and at body weight, and that's it, right? Then you know your fingers are like, say, walking up, and what do you do then?
So at this point, if I'm on the 10 mil edge, what I'll do is then I'll add 10 pounds to my harness, and then I'll hang open hand, and I'll say to myself, establish, control, and then release, and then I'll let go.
Yeah.
And then I'll add another 10 pounds to the harness, and then I'll repeat that phrase to myself.
So it's not like really fixated on, okay, I gotta hang 10 seconds, otherwise it's not gonna work. Yeah,
I'm not fixated. I'm not fixated on that at all. I just need to feel like I'm in control and I've established exactly the hang. Then I'll rest 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll go up another 10 pounds. So from 20, I'll go to 30. 30, I'll go to 40. And then
all that on a 10 millimeter edge.
All that on a 10 millimeter edge. All of it. Because I'm attempting to do a max hang on a 10 millimeter edge. So I'm going to warm up in a slow way. And I feel that this might be the most efficient way without wasting the most amount of energy.
Right. That's important.
And once I get to 50, 60 pounds, I'm still open-handed. I then transition to full crimp, but then I go back down. I go back to 0.
Wow.
So I say, okay, because because I'm warm, open-handed, it doesn't mean I can full crimp 60.
For sure. That's reasonable.
So I go back to 0, and then I touch 0. And at body weight, because it's a 10 mil, I might have to do control, establish, release a couple of times. And then once it feels comfortable and it feels, I feel like it's nothing, I'm not hanging anything, it's too easy, I'll start to increase the weight by like 15 pounds at a time. And I will increase the weight by 15 pounds twice in a row, and then rest a couple minutes. And then I'll increase the weight by 15 pounds again, twice in a row. And then I'll rest all the way until I get to where I need to go. And for my max, it was that it was 110 pounds for 5 seconds. I would breathe super deeply. But let me back it up a little bit because I left something important out. When I'm full crimping at around 50 pounds on a 10 mil edge, I'm so warm, I don't even feel it. This is 50 pounds feels super light.
50
At
pounds
around
added weight. Added weight.
at full crimp. Yeah, at full crimp.
So that's
added weight
essentially
feels
that's
super light.
200 pounds total load, yeah?
Yeah. At 75 to 80 is where I start to feel it. Then at 90, we're getting real. This is real weight. You feel it. 110, okay, this is real. Now, when I went for my 110, I really took a lot of deep breaths before I even attempted this, and I feel like my whole body is like engaged. Like it's not only me holding on, it's like my everything is like engaged for that hang. And when I pulled that off, I swear to God, I was 1 second away from hitting 14, but I didn't realize that that was my body's maximum capacity at that time. And I felt like if you would have asked me if I would have got 14 the following week, I would have said yes. But that was it, baby. That was as far as I could push it in that moment. And what I realized was that it's better to stay away from 5 seconds. If I wanted to continually progress and go higher, I needed to stay with a weight that kept me closer to 9 seconds.
Yeah.
And not 5.
Yeah.
Because you can't really progress out of 5. 5 is like, if you want to know your absolute max in that moment, at that rate of time, if you wanted to continually progress, you needed to stay at 9. And that's what I've learned in this whole process, is that I can always grow at around 9 seconds. The closer I get to 5, I'm cutting myself off.
I have a question, because you said that you peaked.
After that is, I'll do one max hang. I really only have one good max hang in me where I can just give it my all. Like my all. I'm saying we're going until the fingers start to open. And that's enough to get the adaptation, I feel, that you need for the following week. Because you can't do that twice a week. You can only do it about once a week, I found. And I also realized I don't really need to do it on a 10 mil edge. I can do it on a 12.7.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that when you peaked on a 10 millimeter edge, and then you started to lose strength. And when you started to regain it, you were training on a bigger edge, right?
That's correct.
What do you think about that? Because there are these theories that for building strength, bigger edges are better and small edges are better for this, I don't know, recruitment coordination or something, but you can only go so far with small edges, and then to build more strength, you need a bigger edge again.
Yeah, I'm very young in my whole hangboarding experience. So I would agree with you. The primary difference that I feel is there's no pain for me associated with a 12.7 mil edge. There's pain associated with a 10 mil edge. So your skin is like almost in a way burning.
It's also a lot about skin, about having tough fingertips, your fingertips.
And that's another, my tips got on the 10 mil edge, they started to toughen at the tips. So I didn't experience that before. So I started to build calluses on the tips of my skin. And I could do things on a 6 mil edge at body weight that I never thought possible before. Like I could crank out like 6 or 8 pull-ups on a 6 mil edge afterwards. I mean, after I did stuff like that, it was like, oh, I could even do I did a 75-pound pull-up on a 10 mil edge. So that's plus 75 pounds.
Yeah.
And I think that's freaking incredible. So I was able to pull that off, I remember. So, but in terms of training, I think probably I don't think you want to go too big because it's hard to full crimp big things. It's much easier to full crimp stuff around that 12, 13 that feels millimeter edge, that feels comfortable.
Yeah, that's what the full crimp
And
for.
yeah. So and the way I full crimp was specifically geared towards Venus. I know some people wrap the thumb over the index or apply it to the
Yeah,
side
just to
of the
stabilize.
index to stabilize, but I try to get my thumb over. So I'm latching on with my thumb as well too, and I find that I full crimp that way as well too in real life when I can. So that strength that I acquired translated to me being able to do that move in Venus because my thumbs from locking off my thumb were just so ridiculously strong. I also found that by locking off my thumbs, my pinch strength grew tremendously as well.
Yeah,
too.
I was going to ask about that because I think that boulder is not only crimps. There's also you're grabbing an arete. There's like a pinch, right? And
Yeah.
how does that specific hangboard training, this half crimp, this full crimp hangboard training, did it in any way translate to your pinch strength?
Yeah, it did. It did tremendously. It was just like I found I could pinch stuff way more comfortably before than anything else. I haven't tested my absolute strength on a pinch block, which I should do, but I never thought that by training full crimp could translate to like a sloperish pinch that you locked off. You know, it's kind of bizarre to think of training for a full crimp for a pinch. I don't know, but it worked for me.
I mean, in
You
some
know,
ways, your fingers must be getting stronger, but for a pinch, I would assume that you need to work on your thumb also, right? And that obviously
yeah,
that.
no, tremendous amount. Yeah, yeah,
So maybe
tremendous.
think about this pinch block training. I think it's lattice training. They have this new block, and it's sort of like becoming a standard, I think. And you can see on Instagram there are these competitions. I don't know if do you know Yves Gravel, a Canadian boulderer?
Yeah, Eve. Yeah.
But he
I
I
listened
don't
to his
think he won.
podcast.
I don't think he won that competition. I think there was someone even stronger than him. I was like over 50 kilograms or something. I don't know what that pinch feels like because pinches are different. And I think it's pretty heinous though. And well, maybe that's something that you'd like to try. I don't know. Let me know if you do.
No, I'm really interested to see how much further I can push it on the hangboard. I'm in conjunction with using the tool because for me personally, I feel that the tool was really spot on in my experience.
But I'm just
Even
thinking
though
maybe it's because it's the character of the boulder. Because for some boulders maybe it wouldn't be that accurate. Like for sure for Fontainebleau it could be a little bit off. But this particular boulder, because of its crimp nature, I think it's well described by the tool.
I think for agent as well too, because agents full crimp and half crimp. So I think like, and then probably for Bishop, you know, that place I think Bishop is crimping basically. Maybe not from font because it's like it's super open handed, but like I feel like for certain areas, parts of the US or other parts of the world, if it's more reliant upon crimping and pulling hard, that tool is like highly applicable. In my opinion, I hopefully for me, lightning will strike twice, and I'll be able to eventually tell you, hey, done another 8A or harder. But I feel that when you start to venture into climbing beyond 7C plus, you need a sort of guide. And without that guide, it becomes fuzzy logic and you start guessing. And if you can't measure what it is you're trying to do against anything, then you're just wandering in the dark. So I was really happy that I was able to use those numbers to my advantage, you know?
One last thing, you mentioned antagonist training, that it's very important, like being able to push as hard as you pull. Do you have any specific exercises that you use for building that strength?
Yeah, you know, I do bench press, I do shoulder press. Sometimes I do squat as well too, for heel hooking, because like I used to have horrible heel hook injuries in and around my knee, and then that I was able to fix that problem just by squatting and deadlifting. So strengthening my hamstrings was like a big deal. I do wrist curls in both directions, because you got to worry about elbow tendonitis and golfer's elbow.
Right.
So I really try to choose exercises. You know, I focus a lot on the deltoids that are going to help strengthen and deal with the abuse of climbing, because climbing is really taxing on the whole entire body. And I'm now stretching more, way more than I ever used to, because just the nature of indoor climbing gym climbing has required a higher degree of flexibility than I've found in the past. Because like I don't want to get injured that way as well too. I think having really strong triceps is important. I do a lot of weighted dips. Sometimes I'll add 110 pounds onto the dip bar.
Wow.
So I'll do it.
How much can you do with that load?
That's like my max.
Okay.
That's like my max. So I'll make sure that my pulling complements my pushing, because I feel like if you're strong in one direction, you need to be strong in the other, in the opposing direction. So if you're only climbing twice a week, it takes a lot of time the rest of the week to do all that stuff, right? So I'll go to the gym and maybe just hit legs and stretch. The following day, I'll just do some chest and shoulders. The following day, I just might hit my triceps. So, or I might even just go to the gym just to stretch. And if you start to add in those sort of workouts, you realize whether you're climbing or not, just by you going to the gym, you're training to climb anyway, because you're training to not break. So I view me going into the gym lifting weights, as boring as that sounds, as training for climbing. So as opposed to me just climbing every other day or every 2 days or whatever, I view that as a part of my regular climbing regimen, you know, lifting weights.
One thing eluded us, I think, because you told us how you prepare for your bouldering training session, that you do finger recruitment, etc. That takes like, I don't know, probably like 30 minutes or an hour maybe, and then you
yeah, back to answer. Yeah, we didn't answer that question. So after I do my max hang, after I do my max hang, I will start my regular gym session.
Yeah.
And it takes me about an hour, I want to say about an hour and a half before I even get to my regular gym session.
Oh, wow.
And my regular gym session, what I will do is, let's say I'm projecting a 9 or a 10, or I want to get a 9 or a 10 in the same session. I'll start with ground up, see how I feel. And if I don't flash it, or there's a section that's hard to me, I'll test out that area. And once I've figured out all the moves, I'll start resting. either 5 minutes if I feel like I can get it really quick, or 10 minutes between each go if I feel like it's potentially near my limit. So if you're climbing once every 10 minutes, you can have a session that's pretty long.
Yeah.
Because I at least have 10 good burns in me. So I'm patient with my climbing. So I don't try to rush my session. I try to make sure that every attempt is a quality attempt. And I really space it all out. So I want to make sure that at the end of my session, I've hit that objective, and whatever that objective is, or I'm close to it. Because like I mentioned earlier before, with a lot of these gym climbs, if you don't have institutional knowledge, what you're training on could be a lot harder than what you actually realize. So I feel like it's important to be rested for each attempt and really not be half-baked. If you see Rabbit2 in his latest Sean Rabbit2 in his latest video, he's trying a V13, right? And I think he tried the V13, or the way they appeared, the editing, the way they made the editing, it looked like he tried from dusk until dawn, or for a very long time, and he must have taken huge breaks in between. So when you go outdoors, when you try something, you're taking long breaks in between. So I try to bring that mentality of that outside, inside.
Do you need to?
I find that helps.
Because when you go outside, do you do you do finger recruitment before you climb? Do you take a portable head? No, you don't.
I don't. I drive my friends crazy sometimes. I love to look for all the zeros and ones, and I love to do a super. I try to emulate my gym, emulate my warm up in the gym. I try to get that level of volume in and warm up. And then what I'll do, since I don't have a hangboard with me, I'll look at the climb I want to climb, and I'll see if I can hang from it. So for Venus, I started hanging on certain sections and then doing single sections
That's smart.
as a progressive warm-up until I felt fired and ready to go from the ground up. Right. So that's what I did. So a gym session for me can honestly be 4 or 5 hours. It's just that I'm resting for a lot of that.
But do you end up exhausted, or is it like, okay, you have 10 good burns in you, and then when you've done it, even though you're not like falling to the ground, you just call it quits and leave?
So I parse it out as different energy systems. So like obviously the training is like my strength and power, and then I have my performance end. And the bouldering would be the performance, like I'm focusing on that 9 or that 10. And then I have like the conditioning aspect, which some people call junk volume, but where I warm down, and I'll warm down on 4s and 5s. And I'm really not trying to burn myself out, but I want to make sure that I have some sort of condition capacity. And I think that doing a bunch of low end stuff to warm down helps me stay conditioned and fit for the stuff that needs a lot of energy and power. So I also like that because I can just solely check out and focus on technique. So when I climb that V4, I'm like, am I climbing this V4 or 5 and I'm not feeling it at all, and I'm solely relying on technique? And that lets me know that I'm able to address all of my skills. I've addressed strength, I've addressed power, I've addressed projecting, I've addressed my technique. So I constantly try to hone all those things all the time. So each section of my there's like chapters, you could say, to my gym session. It's just not I'm going to the gym, warming up, and just bouldering random things. So there's a focus, there's a purpose for everything that I do.
And that comes with age, and experience.
And that comes with age, that comes with experience, because I hate nothing more than going to the gym and feeling tired. I hate it because that means I'm gonna have a shitty session. I'm gonna think about it. It bothers me. I'll kick myself. I'll be, why did I show up to the gym half baked? Like yesterday, if I yesterday I was supposed to hit V13 finger strength, because the last time I did my self testing, I fell short. It was 110 pounds on a 12.7 mil edge, and I hit it for 9 seconds at 150 pounds. I needed to hit it for 10 seconds to be right at the beginning of the V13 zone. And I felt like yesterday I couldn't have done it. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to take an extra rest day. So today, that is my goal, is to be able to hang on a 12.7 mil edge with 110 pounds, full crimp for 10 seconds, and I should be in that zone. I should hit V13. That's taken me, think about this, almost a month to get back there since my send.
Yeah.
So I haven't experienced that strength since September of this past year. And my goal, for me to really feel confident for my next climb, because I've never climbed a 12 before, I want that same methodology. I want to be 2 grades stronger than the climb in finger strength. And that might not be everything I need to send. But I know if I can't send it, the finger strength will not be the issue. It might be I need more bicep strength for a lock off. So I can narrow down my deficiency in that way. So if I'm deficient, it won't be finger strength. It will be I just need a little more pulling power.
That for sure. That tool can take care of that. You know, it's not fingers, but it could be something else.
It could be something else.
You need to be a little detective, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, you really need to be, because then you start to think about, well, how long can I do this for, right? You know, I don't know, because like there's only Daiko Yamato, right? You know, there's not many like pioneers I feel that are non-pros pushing it super hard in their 40s. Maybe you know them, but I don't know them. So, and everybody that I know in their 40s are broke. You know, my tendonitis, my shoulder. Oh my God, I'm lucky if I can do this V5. You know, and these are strong people that I looked up to in my 20s and early 30s. So, you know, you start to need to become a jack of all trades and learn how to be your own coach in a way, so you can just stay in the game and keep going. It's easier said than done, and you have to be patient.
You have to be patient, for sure. For sure, you have to be patient.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
As like, because you're like, you know, I've never had any coaching or anything like that. You know, when you have somebody, I guess, an adult as myself, who's stumbled and never really taken a training and only, because I'm from that era where there was no equipment for training until the first mega gym was built in New York City. All we did was just basically climb. The concept of training was ridiculous, and it was boring. But when you hear somebody say like, I've been able to accomplish all this in my first hangboard session, this is exactly, because I don't know the science behind everything that I've done. I could just tell you based anecdotally how it felt to me. The trajectory that I've taken for myself, the choices that I've made, those seem plausible in your mind in terms of like a way to train.
I think
because I've never heard of anybody just saying train recruitment first, I guess, because that's what I was doing more or less. Since you've said it, and then go for that hang. Don't like pump yourself up with a bunch of volume and then fall short in the end.
I mean, I don't know if you'd do it the same way if you were younger, but now you have a lot of experience. You you have intuition, definitely, and yeah, you did things right. You did things right, and that's the way it's done. Recruit first, and then climb. You need this to prime your muscles for high exertion. And maybe you have experience also in other sports where this is applicable, right? Like you mentioned, powerlifting or whatever. That's the way it's done. So you contemplate it a lot, and you listened to your body, and you were really training with intent, and it paid off. You know?
Yeah, because I was scared to read too much into it and prescribe a training plan and not get the end results. That's what I was, and I basically did. I went with my own intuition, and that's how I ended up with my conclusion.
And in a way, you trained specifically for your project. This is also very important.
I did specifically.
Project, you knew what you missed, what you were missing, right? It was this crimp strength or whatever, and you worked on improving that, and the results came. But it's not always so easy to realize what you need. Like we just
this is true
about finger strength. Okay, you may be certain that your finger strength is on par, but there could be other things.
Oh, hopefully I can keep doing this for a couple more years. I don't know for how long, but I'm gonna try to push the envelope as far as I can.
Yeah, so do I, because I have kids now. My boy is turning 7 in January, and my daughter is 3.5, and they are already climbing with me at the gym. They seem to like it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I'd like to be able to take them to the crag, in 10 years also. And although I think in 10 years they'll have their own friends for climbing. At least I hope so. So yeah, that's I have a purpose, and I'd like to maintain a certain amount of fitness till I'm past 50 for sure. So yeah.
All right, man. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. This was very enjoyable. I'm glad you talked me into it.
I'm glad too. I think people that are around 40, they need a place where they can just hear from the regular Joe, the regular person, not a pro climber.
I don't think you're such a regular Joe, with that. I mean, I hope people are not gonna go like, hey, I can do this too, and then they hang with, I don't know, 100 pounds of added weight and break their fingers or whatever. This is not average. This is not an average thing, not an average thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully, please, if you're listening, do not try to break your fingers and hang with 100 pounds from a 10 mil edge.
Yeah.
You really need to know what you're doing, because when you first do it, it is a bit scary.
So just have to do it gradually, and be aware. It's not easy, you need to have this intuition, you need to know what you're doing, really.
You really need to know your body.
Yeah. Okay, Paul, thank you very much again. We will keep in touch. Okay.
All right, sounds good, man. Have a good night.